Malcolm X has been dead for 60 years now. In what ways can his vision and his politics guide Black people in this current political climate? And even if it can, wasn't Malcolm X a misogynist? And if
Uh-oh.
so, does that call into question his views on Black unity? And what can Black Americans learn from Minister Malcolm about our struggle for freedom and its broader connection to other Africans across the diaspora? Well, I'm so glad you asked because we are talking about it after the break.
Brokers, welcome to another episode of Brokers, where we talk about the unbelievable ish this country has done to keep us broke. Now here are your hosts, Amber and Erika.
Hello, brokers. I'm Amber.
And I'm Erika.
And on this episode of Brokish, we are talking to you about Malcolm X and the role that his work and his vision for unity in the Black community is going to play in, what is this, season 11, 12,
Yes.
13, 15?
11.
Okay,
Stop.
season 11. But before we start, I want to have a conversation with my favorite. You all know her as Erika, but she has a new name, okay? She has been reborn. This is Pebbles, and I am TLC, okay? Because I am truly tired of her shit, okay? I'm tired of the oppression, the abuse. And so, Pebbles, tell the people, what have you been up to besides terrorizing me? Tell them.
Well, first of all, I'm going to ignore the things that you said, Amber. And I think the last time that we got together, it was like before my birthday. Didn't we just talk before my birthday? We talked after my
Yes,
birthday?
it was right. It was right before your
Before my
birthday.
birthday. Right. So I am, a year older, but still cute. So, that's, breaking hearts since the 90s. It's all good. So I got to celebrate for my birthday, which was perfect. I don't even know if I can say this without y'all clowning me, but y'all gonna clown me anyway. So, girl, we went to go see John B. Amber.
I love it. Listen, I love a good R&B concert, okay? Little
Look,
blue-eyed soul.
we went to go see John B. And I have to tell y'all, the mic is still on. That little man is still cute, and the mic is still on. So that was exciting. And I also had one of my friends in from out of town, and we did karaoke, which I hadn't done karaoke in a while. So that was lots of fun. And so it was low key birthday, but it was very fun and in the streets and sort of fun and flirty. So I loved it.
That's good. It sounds like your heart is full. Did you sing Mercedes Boy as your karaoke song? Or
I didn't.
girlfriend? Oh,
I
okay.
don't do that. I'm not really Pebbles. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about what the new year holds for me. And yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to. Taurus season is over, which is very sad for me. I have to wait a whole nother year to cut up like that again. But I also probably don't have the energy to cut up like that again for another year. So look, it's
Yes,
all
because
good.
you're going to be spending the remaining months of this year becoming a doctor, obviously. So,
Oh, you had to remind me. You just brought the whole mood down. Thanks, Amber. Can always count on you. Thanks. Can always count on
anyway,
you. But what you been up
anyway.
to? What you been up to?
Well, I have just been getting my life together as school is ending. And you guys know I have 600 kids. So, all the end of the year programs
Yes.
and, celebrating everybody completing the year. And also, I've been trying to like kind of get my life together because, y'all, I got a job, ghetto. So I'm
Burr,
going
burr,
back
burr,
to
burr,
work.
burr. This is where if I had the sound effects, I'd play them. Amber got a job. It's
There's
been
really
so
no sound.
long.
I know there's really no sound effects for this because I must say, um, I enjoy being unemployed. Okay, but yes, I have enjoyed being unemployed. I am going back to work June 9th, but I'm glad that I have some things to look forward to. We're going on family vacation in
Like a paycheck?
July.
Like,
Well, yes, a paycheck, but I mean, I really feel like I'm well suited for other things, pyramid schemes, moving weight for the cartel. I
whoa.
don't want to work like a real job. Like I want to work, like
Whoa.
one of those shadowy
The views
jobs.
expressed by Amber Sims are not those of Erika Houston Brown. Let me be clear.
No, I'm just kidding, y'all. I can't go to the prison. I don't like baloney and I got OCD, so no. But seriously, I am excited to go back to work, I guess, allegedly, supposedly. And I'm looking forward to just, slowing down a little in the summertime, because this is the only time of the year where our children don't have quite as many activities. And I am able to take a break from my real job, which is being their Uber driver. So I am looking forward to that. And y'all know what I'm really doing right now that is taking up a lot of my time. I'm trying to get my outfit together for Cowboy Carter, the chitlin circuit.
My gosh.
Okay. I am trying, and I done had to send back.
We're on here talking about freeing the people, and you going down to Beyonce's show to watch her get on that horse in front of that American flag and sing her little heart out.
Yes. Oh. And so I really need to get my outfit together for Cowboy Carter. So that's something else that I've been doing too. But other than that, that's it. That's it.
Well, it sounds good, Amber. Whatever floats your boat. I feel like there needs to be, y'all just all need to get on the Facebook group, because I got all these friends who are trying to find their outfits. And what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I'm like, I don't care what y'all wearing to that concert. Like,
we do. We need a group. We need a support group, because it's stressful. Like, because the people that's already been on Instagram posting their outfits, posting their customized fans. I mean,
sashes too. Did you get
sashes, everything. And then little Miss Shirley is on here putting us all to shame. Like, it's a lot of pressure in these streets. It really is. And so, we do need a support group. That's actually a really good idea. And you can be our muse, Pebbles.
Oh, anyway, well, you know what? We came here today to talk about some serious things. We came to talk about how Black people get free, and it's not down to the Cowboy Carter concert where it's going to happen. Unfortunately, Amber, that is not where you're going to go down to get free. But y'all, to kick off like the first real show of the season, we didn't want to talk about Brother Malcolm without our friend to the show, Dr. Kehinde Andrews. And if you don't know him, he is the UK's first professor of Black studies. And if every time you meet him, he'll let you know, at Birmingham City University, and where he led the establishment of the first Black studies program in Europe. He's the chair of the Harambe Organization of Black Unity, the editor-in-chief of Make It Plain, and he is the author of a bunch of books: Psychosis Whiteness, The New Age of Empire, Back to Black. He has recently written a book called Nobody Can Give You Freedom. And he has also created a documentary all about Malcolm X. So, Kehinde, Dr. Andrews, welcome back to Brokish.
The way you say doctor, it feels like an insult. And that's how I'm taking it. So.
I'm glad you caught it.
I didn't want to call you the N-word. So I said, I'm going to call you Dr. Andrews.
Malcolm said, what do they call a Black man with a PhD?
Nigga. I don't know. Is that what he said?
Yes.
Dang, you didn't tell me that before I started my anyway. We're happy to have you back on the show. So first of all, like I said, I'm very excited because I know you are on a book tour. Is that what people say, when they write a book and they're going all around the world talking about it? So I know you're on a book tour. Also, you just released your documentary. So get us caught up. Tell us what the book is about. Tell us what the documentary is about, just to get us started.
Yeah, so good to be back on Brokish. And so the book is 100 years. Malcolm would have been 100 years. It was May 19th. And it's 60 years since he died as well in February. And so I thought this was the perfect time. Malcolm's really underappreciated. He's somebody that, we see the face, we know the name, but there's no substance behind what we know, right? And so I actually did look, and there's no good book that just breaks down what was Malcolm's politics. So not his biography, not how he grew up, not who he knew. Like, what was his politics? And actually, I would say Malcolm's one of the most important intellectuals of the 20th century, leaves a really, really clear analysis and a really, really clear solution. And it just wasn't a book that just broke down what that was. So for his 100th birthday, I thought, you know what? This is the time. Let's lay it out. Malcolm's really important intellectual, and not just intellectual, like as in academic sense, but actually we had 5 years ago is George Floyd, right? We had all these protests and we were looking for answers. Malcolm done told us what to do 60 years ago. We just didn't listen. We literally didn't listen. And so the whole book is like, look, this is the politics, this is the program, this is what we should do. And I figured a book's one way to do it. Everybody don't read, which is fine. So we also made a film. In fact, we met you, Erika, when we were in New York. We started the film in Birmingham, went to London, spoke to my parents during the film, and then went over to New York, met Malcolm's third daughter, Dr. Ilyasha Shabazz, spent time in the Shabazz Center, which is where Malcolm was killed as well. And yeah, the book's just kind of a intro. The film was kind of an intro to the book in some ways. Like, what are the key messages of Malcolm X? And I was trying to say, well, let's put this message out there, because we're trying to build organization. We're trying to have a convention in the Gambia next year. So for me, it's not really an academic exercise. It's a practical thing to try and get people to say, yeah, this is a politics. Let's do it. Let's get to work.
So Malcolm X, like you said, there's the Shabazz Center in New York. Malcolm has children who are carrying on his work and legacy. Why should we leave that to a Black Brit like you? Like, why do you get to be the standard bearer of Malcolm's political message?
Someone needs to do it, right? I mean, like, it's the kind of message that's so important that someone needs to do it. And I always say, look, his family's great. Actually, Matt's daughter is wonderful. The Shabazz Center is a really nice space. But in terms of carrying on the actual political legacy, Malcolm leaves the program. Organization of Afro-American Unity says exactly what to do bit by bit, step by step. And no one's done it. And that includes his family. That includes many people who claim his name. So let's do it. It's not really about me being a standard bearer. It's about saying, this is Malcolm's work. Why are we not doing Malcolm's work? And hey, someone's got to step into the void. But I don't trust me, trust Malcolm. And actually, the whole book is, you've read the book, right? Malcolm quote, Malcolm quote, Malcolm quote. There are many, many, many receipts to just say this is what Malcolm thought. And I will stress, Malcolm could be wrong. People might not agree. That's fine. But this is the politics outline, the legacy that we should be following if we want to invoke Malcolm's name. And if we don't, that's fine. But then let's not invoke his name. Because I think what happens too often is people will say Malcolm, put a picture up, and there's nothing about Malcolm X at all. In fact, in many ways, oftentimes, it's kind of the opposite. Some things that Malcolm would never, ever say or do.
So one of the things I found interesting was that you, as a British person, and even watching the documentary as well, you sort of talk about Malcolm's broader connection to Africans in the diaspora, which is something that I think a lot of us in America don't know about. We learn, if we learn anything at all, about Malcolm's work as uniquely American and focused on critiquing and dismantling the oppressive systems here. And so why did you feel like it was important to really highlight Malcolm's work, not only as a Pan-African, but as somebody who was committed to creating unity? And I say Pan-African loosely, but, you know, creating Black unity in that definition of what Pan-Africanism is. Why did you think it was important for you as a British academic to highlight that part of Malcolm that's often lost in his work?
Yeah, so that's one of the things which I think we're losing more over time, definitely, is if you think about what's Malcolm's key ideas, well, actually, what does he mean by African American? So Malcolm has OAU, Organization Afro-American Unity, and actually was in a call once recently talking about 100 years of Malcolm, and there was a academic, maybe it was an academic, I don't know, there's a guy in the call anyway, and he said, look, Malcolm was all about being American. Like, why are we talking about his Grenadian mother? Why? He's about American. Look, Afro-American. But that shows us that person never actually listened or read anything that Malcolm ever said, because Malcolm defined Afro-American basically as anybody not in Africa. So he's very clear, look, those in the Caribbean, those in Latin America. Because Malcolm understood that, look, there is no, America is an extension of Europe, and Europe's an extension of America. And the Caribbean, like, the only difference between me and you is that my ancestors got off the boat in a different place. That's it. And actually, like, we may well have been on British ships on the boat. So when, like, I always say, I'm not Black British, I'm just Black in Britain. Right? One of Malcolm's most important interventions to say you're not an American. You're African, you just happen to be in America. And the way that we get unity and power and strength is when we organize together collectively, as we should be. When we were stolen, kidnapped from these places and brought to America, Caribbean, etc., etc. And so I don't even really, I mean, so my family's Jamaican. That's not a place I identify with either. Same way, kidnapped and taken to Jamaica. And there's a whole national program about Jamaican, Be Jamaican, National Jamaican, which is largely about stopping us from resisting. So if we're going to say, like, what's one of Malcolm's key principles, it's global Black unity. And actually, that's what gets him killed. When he leaves as a Nation of Islam, starts to travel through Africa, is connecting the struggles up That's when he becomes extremely dangerous, and the CIA say, look, he's got to go. So those dangerous ideas, and unfortunately, the opposite thing's happening. So people in Britain are claiming black British. People in Jamaica are waving those flags. People in Nigeria saying that Nigeria, and African Americans, you've seen ADOS, Foundation of Black Americans, all this. We're going in the complete opposite direction. This is one of the things Malcolm will be extremely upset about if he was still around today.
And so just if we take the book, in the intro to the book, you have what I think is sort of like this beautiful expression of your love for your wife and your admiration for Malcolm. And it's clear that his politics sort of invade your intellectual and your personal pursuits. But what do you say to people that would claim that your adoration of Malcolm X creates this blind spot for you and in terms of your political analysis, right? Because it feels very much like you are a Malcolm devotee. Right. So again, why do we trust you to do this work when you are, you have no position except at his feet?
I want to say really stressed. Like, actually, Malcolm the man, I can't tell you very much about. I'm not interested. It really is what's the politics. And I actually always wanted to have having this book tour, showing the film, and I always have to put this like disclaimer. I am not hero worshiping Malcolm X. It's not even about Malcolm. Malcolm just represents black radicalism, the politics of black radicalism. It goes back centuries through Nanny Maroons, through Haitian Revolution, through Nat Turner, there's a whole tradition of radical politics of Garveyism, and Malcolm just nails it perfectly. And that's what I do, if you like devotee to, is that politics. And Malcolm's a spokesperson for it. But also, if you read the book, there's some parts of Malcolm's I don't agree with. The UN was a mistake. He stayed in the Nation of Islam far too long. His views on women, they evolved a bit, but they weren't really all the way there. So, like, if you read the book, you're not just going to get Malcolm's great. There are moments where I'm saying, look, actually, you know what? We need to rethink this. We need to rethink that. Everybody has blind spots. But there's a framework you get from Malcolm, which is essentially black radical politics, which is really, really important. And that's important to save, I think.
I guess. And if we have time, because I did read the book, right? And so if we do have time, hopefully we'll be able to get to some of those areas where I was like, seems like you're giving him, too much credit on this one, right? Like, I don't know. I think he probably should have gone in a bit harder, but we shall see.
Maybe.
So, for sure. So, like we talked about when Amber and I got together in our season opener for season 11, y'all know that in season 10, we were focused on that crazy man, John Hope Bryan, and all the foolishness that he talks about as it relates to Black economic positionality in the United States and what he says we need to do to get out of it. So that's why this season is a bit of a palate cleanser, right? So we are going to focus on a man who actually has some things that we can use to help us to get to liberation, right? So we're focusing on Malcolm, and we're looking at, in Brokish, we're all about broken systems. So we're looking at all of these different broken systems that we have, right? So whether that's the healthcare system, the educational system, the economic, the political systems, all of that. So that's sort of like just the foundation that I wanted to make sure that we were clear on. So we know, of course, that when we talk about broken systems, that this nation was never built and meant for us, right? So we know that they're not necessarily broken. They're working as they were designed as it relates to Black people. But there is propaganda about how there is an American dream that everybody can get. So we're sort of using that as the baseline, right? So if we assume that the propaganda is true, that everybody can achieve the broken dream, then the systems for us are broken. And so we want to talk about that access to the American dream. So I'm going to read an excerpt from the book, and it goes, so this is a quote from Malcolm from 1963. And he says, he breaks your legs and then calls you cripple. He puts out your eyes and says you can't see. Unemployment has forced many of our people into crime. Oh my gosh, Amber just talked about entering a crime, crime, unemployment. Like but the real criminal is the state house. You're not poor accidentally. He maneuvers you into poverty. You're not ignorant accidentally. He maneuvers you into ignorance. You're not a drug addict accidentally. Why this white man maneuvers you into drug addiction. You're not a prostitute accidentally. You have been maneuvered into prostitution. So I do want you to tell us about this American project, right? This U.S. project, and how this system was created, especially as it relates to us, to maneuver us into these different things.
Yeah, so I mean, look, Malcolm tells us what the system can no more provide freedom, justice, and equality than a chicken can lay a docked egg, right? It's just not meant to do it. And there's a whole framework that comes around from that. And particularly the difference, one of the differences, the big difference between the US and the UK, Europe, is that, you know, you have slavery in America, and so there's millions of you there. And then so after slavery ends, there's millions of you there. And it's like, so what do we do with you? And so why America, you see the extremes, is because they actually have to then create from the beginning a whole architecture of the state which is against you, right? Even before you're free, right? So free fist compromise. Right. They're laying down in the law that you are less than, and they're backing it up with economics. So you can only get certain jobs, sharecropping. After slavery ends, it's sharecropping, it's dispossession. Then when you come north, it's the worst jobs, etc., the worst housing, etc. There's a whole system. Anti-Blackness is just baked in, has to be baked into America from the beginning. To keep African Americans out, right? Which is slightly different to the UK because we're not here. We're in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, in Africa, and so when we come over here, it's the same, but you don't really have the same. There's not really any racist laws in England; like, this don't exist, right? Whereas in America, the whole framework is created basically from the beginning to keep you out, which is why, yeah, like Malcolm told you, maneuvered into all of these things, and so you end up at the bottom of society with all the worst outcomes, not because it's your fault. Like John Hope Bryant's telling you it's your fault, right? You're not working hard enough, you're not educated enough, you're not. But actually, no, you were placed there and you were kept there. I mean, the baddest thing I've ever heard is funding schools based on property taxes, which is such a, when you really think about it, like, who thinks that is clearly to dispossess poor people and black people in particular, right? You will get worse education, you will therefore end up in the worst jobs, etc. There's a whole system that's set up, particularly in the States. To keep you poor.
So let me ask you this, because as we see your philosophies laid out about Malcolm's politics transcending across institutions, one of the institutions that you had a whole lot of smoke for was religion, and in particularly the Nation of Islam. And it was interesting to me because I thought a lot of the things you described about NOI was non-unique, and perhaps that's me showing my own Baptist trauma. But I felt like it was the harms were non-unique and that they sort of were bedrock characterizations of religion. But one of the things that I found was so interesting that I actually did not know about Malcolm was the ways that he was intentional near the end of his life about creating distinct separation between his orthodoxy and his political work. And one of the things that you talked about was a quote that he had stated, and I just want to read it to the brokers, where you said that Malcolm declared, "Islam is my religion, but my religious philosophy is personal between me and the God in whom I believe. If we bring up religion, we'll have differences, we'll have arguments, and we'll never be able to get together. But if we keep our religion at home, keep our religion in the closet, keep our religion between ourselves and our God, but when we come out here, we have a fight that's common to all of us against an enemy who is common to all of us." And that is so different than the Malcolm we meet in the beginning of his ministry and in the beginning of his political life. But also, I feel like it was very unique to the struggle for liberation at that time. Because if you look at other prominent people, all of them were affiliated with or anchored in a religion in some way. And I'm talking about, your Martin Luther Kings. I'm talking about other contemporaries of theirs. And so talk to us about why you were so harshly critical of the Nation of Islam and why you feel that Malcolm made the decision near the end when he transitioned to traditional Sunni Islam to keep that separate from his political work.
Yeah, you're probably right. The nation's not that different than lots of churches, lots of religions in the way it's organized. This might not even be different either, but my big criticism and why Malcolm eventually leaves the nation is that the religion and the politics are together. So he says, look, we have a religious solution. Muhammad has a religious solution. That's all. And so in the Nation of Islam orthodoxy, white people actually are the devils, like literally are individual devils. And they're just waiting. Their time is up and God's going to come down and wipe out the white devils. So all we need to do is basically join the nation, live right, and it'll take care of itself. So what that leads to in practical terms is a really, really conservative politics on behalf of the nation. So, you know, they don't get involved. Malcolm, all the time he's in the nation, he's trying to get them involved in stuff and saying, let's go and defend the civil rights organizers, because we keep talking about violence. Let's go and retaliate when Ronald Stokes is killed in 62, who's an NOI member. Let's go and make links with leaders around the world. And he's just stopped. Like, they say, no, that's not what we do. We have a religious solution and that's it. And so he gets loads of criticism while he's because he goes around talking everywhere. And he can't really answer it. These are the times when Malcolm can't really answer it. He's like, well, Muhammad says it's a religious solution, so what am I going to say? He just kind of shuts down. And what really precipitates his leave is when 63, when JFK is assassinated. You know, Malcolm had been cussing JFK the whole time. He's a fox, he's a liberal fox, etc. And they were banned. The nation, Muhammad banned everybody in the nation from saying anything about it. But Malcolm couldn't stop, right? Because Malcolm's Malcolm. So he actually gives a speech called God's Judgment on White America, which is obviously what it's about, but he doesn't mention JFK in the speech. But after the speech, someone asked him about JFK, and he says,
the chickens.
Chickens coming home to roost, right? And as an old farm boy, I can't be mad. I'd be glad, not sad, that chickens come home to roost, and that's what gets him suspended. But it wasn't that was the kind of the tip of it, if you like. And it's only really when he leaves the nation and he says, actually, no, look, let me put this philosophy into being. And I want to stress, in the nation, he's still meeting leaders, he's still creating, he hasn't created an organization, but you can see the philosophies there. But when he leaves the nation, he gets the opportunity to put it into practice. And it's actually ironic, he becomes more devoutly Islamic, right? Fans of Muslim Mosque Incorporated, goes to Saudi Arabia to get scholarships, etc. So he's more Muslim, does the Hajj. But then in doing that, he actually separates out and says, as a black person, it's political, what we have to do, religion has to be somewhere else. And any religion you want to be is fine, as long as we're on the same page politically, which I think is a lesson we definitely need to learn. Because religion is one of those things that just divides us. But you can find Uncle Tom Christians, Uncle Tom Muslims, Uncle Tom African spirituality. Oh, geez, there's loads of them. So you know what I'm saying? Religion is not the test. The test should be the politics, right?
So this was one of the, and you and I have not actually had a fight about the book yet. So we're doing this for the first time now. But I guess the part for me that was difficult is when you criticize the Nation of Islam, it comes off as a very personal thing, right? Like you call them a cult, which lots of people do, right? Like you're not the first person to call the Nation of Islam a cult.
That's not cool. That's what it is. I mean, it wasn't an insult. It's just a description.
Wow. But I guess that's my point, right? To the point of religion being divisive, I think it can also be divisive when we sort of dismiss people's beliefs or things that they feel. So I agree with the second half of Malcolm's thought process in terms of, hey, keep your religion at home, get in your prayer closet or your closet in general, and let that be between you and a god or gods that you serve. But I do wonder about how we alienate people when we use like really harsh language to talk about the Nation of Islam, for example, right? Like there are still, I don't know how many members, but I would say, a bunch of people that are in the Nation of Islam today. And don't we want them to be a part of the fight for liberation? So what does it do when we use this really incendiary language to talk about their organization? It feels like it's doing the same thing that he talked about in terms of putting religion in the forefront. Yeah,
so look, I'll be honest. I didn't think cult I didn't use cult as an insult. I literally.
That was just one of the things. You said a lot of things about the Nation of Islam.
But no, so in the book, I really tried to put forward Malcolm's view. And what did Malcolm do when he died? He was cussing the nation hard. Like there was actually a moment where when he leaves the nation, he's like, I can leave the nation and leave the nation alone. And he just says, like, I'm just going to leave it alone, whatever, go and do my thing. But he actually feels responsible for the nation. So we often say that the Nation of Islam is responsible for Malcolm X. It's the complete opposite. When Malcolm joins a nation, there's a handful of people. Like it is actually like a cult would have been the word you would use to describe it. It's very, very small. A few people. Malcolm joins, literally goes around city to city to city, building up the nation almost by himself and turns it into a 50,000 member organization. So the nation we remember now, that's because of Malcolm. If Malcolm doesn't join that nation, we forget about it. It's one of those like Morris Science Temple that we never think about again, right? And so Malcolm feels responsible. He's like, look, I built this organization. He says, I built a criminal organization. And then he feels responsible to say, look, I've got to do something else and bring people out of that organization. And also, we shouldn't forget, and this is, I have to say, the Nation of Islam, I know the state were involved, the CIA were involved, the FBI were involved. The Nation of Islam were actually involved in the killing of Malcolm X, and Louis Farrakhan most certainly had something to do with it. So I do get a bit annoyed when I'm seeing people go, oh yeah, Farrakhan. Nah, bottom there. At some point, everybody can't come on board. And this is actually, again, a key principle of Malcolm. People aren't for you. You got to say they're not for you. And unfortunately, a nation doesn't have a politics agenda, track record, future record, any record whatsoever of being on the side of Black liberation. So why are we trying to bring them along?
Well, I'm thinking about the Nation of Islam as the Nation of Islam versus the people who are individual members of the Nation of Islam, right? And again, I'm not here to defend or fight for the Nation of Islam at all. But my point is just sometimes I feel, and especially we'll talk about this a little bit later, that the way we approach people gets in the way of us trying to build solidarity with people we could have solidarity with, right? So again, I'm not talking about the leaders of the NOI, but just like everyday people who may be in a position to want to learn more and want to change what they're doing. I'm sorry, Amber.
No, I was going to say that was the part of it that I felt like, well, these harms are non-unique. I mean, you look at people like Elder Lightfoot Michaud and how he, used his influence and his leadership in church to undermine Martin Luther King. And maybe again, it's because I grew up in a church environment. A lot of the things that you critiqued about the Nation of Islam seemed just characteristic of what happens when religions go from small to big and when they start to co-opt institution and co-opt systems. And, I felt like, to the point that Erika's making just a little bit, I think my critique is slightly different. I feel like sometimes we give each other more smoke than we, give the white people, because the Nation of Islam.
Well, Malcolm said we should do that. I read in the book that he said we should.
They did. That is a key.
Because I read
it. Now you.
Yeah. The thing. So it's interesting because actually, even in Birmingham, but we have Nation of Islam in the UK.
When you say Birmingham, you got to be like Birmingham, UK, because somebody gonna think you're talking about down to the Alabama, and you're not talking about down to the Alabama.
I know. I was like, okay, so we have Nation of Islam in Birmingham, duh. But then
I said Birmingham. I didn't say Birmingham. That's
excuse me.
So, in the UK, in Birmingham, we have a Nation of Islam, and Nation of Islam does some good work. I'm not even saying they don't. Even in America, they do some good work. Like in terms of who's the people going into prisons, who's the people. What the thing about a nation which you cannot critique is they will go into prisons. They'll go and work with the downtrodden, the forgotten people, 100%, and have a good track record in that sense. But I don't think Malcolm wouldn't have said that anybody in the nation can't join the revolution. But I think we have to be honest and say, well, look, if you're going to join the revolution, you're probably going to leave the Nation of Islam, because the beliefs, the actual core belief that this is a religious solution, doesn't hold with the political ideology. So eventually, that's not to say don't. If you're in the nation, please do read. In fact, someone from the nation up in England, Leeds, came down. We had a whole back and forth about it. Maybe the language puts you off. I don't know. I think we're stronger people than that, right? We can take critique.
Yeah.
I don't know. We can take critique. It's fine.
Here we go.
Can't we?
I just think most religious people see the solution or the quest for liberation as an extension of their religious praxis. I to me, it just felt very par for the course. I view liberation work as an extension of my Christian faith. So to me, it just felt like a critique of religion in general, that most people filter their liberatory work through their religious framework. And that's certainly not unique to the Nation of Islam.
What I would say, I think it's the two things for me the nation's important. One is to separate Malcolm from the nation, because I think we have to remember him is very much connected. And
so actually talk about the clear change that happened right before he passed, so talk about that like in more detail, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so like the big, there's not, I'm actually trying to stress there's not huge evolutions in Malcolm, but the big change that happens is he leaves the Nation of Islam. And leaving the nation is hugely important, because then you get Organization Afro-American Unity, you get the revolutionary program, you get, he travels around, he goes to Saudi Arabia, does the Hajj, starts Muslim Mosque Incorporated, also goes around this big trip to Africa where he goes to meets all the leaders on the African continent, is trying to connect the struggle. None of that happens if he's in the Nation of Islam, because the Nation of Islam prevents that from happening. This is what I'm trying to say. Nations actually stops the politics. So Malcolm leaving the nation is really, really important. And then Malcolm takes the decision, which he doesn't have to do, to then attack the nation and say, actually, no, this is an organization you actually need to leave because it's corrupt from the top down. It's not taking into liberation. And so he really tries to separate. And then the nation are involved in his killing. So I do think it's really separate Malcolm from the nation. These are two different things. And I actually would say they're actually incompatible in terms of the politics that Malcolm makes as expressed, which is why he leaves. And I think one of my big criticisms of him is he stays in the nation for far too long. And actually, he doesn't even leave. He gets kicked out and he tries to stay in. He's like really trying to, he doesn't want to leave, but he really should have left earlier because it just wasn't going to work. So I think there are specific things about the Nation of Islam, which it's not, that bit on the nation isn't a critique of all religion. Maybe there's some aspects which are similar, but there's something specific about the Nation of Islam, which if we're saying where are we going for the future, that's not the way. And I think it's important to say that's not the way.
On a related but unrelated note, Amber, I get your little jabs of, well, I grew up in the church, and as a person of faith, like that only relates to you, whatever. Anyway, so moving on.
Maybe I guess hit dogs still hollering in 2025. Okay. The hit dogs is still hollering.
Kehinde, Malcolm had a lot to say about education, right? About education, about formal schooling. And so in the book, you talked about he viewed it as, and I quote, a key site of the reproduction of the Negro. And so I'd love for you to give us some more detail about how Malcolm viewed the Negro and how education and formal schooling were tools used to help reify the Negro and teach us to hate ourselves. But before you start, I'll read an excerpt from the book where it reads, "The white man teaches you that Columbus discovered America, George Washington founded it, Patrick Henry said, 'Give me liberty or give me death,' and Abraham Lincoln was the one who was responsible for the emancipation of the slaves. From the cradle to the grave, you and I are taught to look up to white people. He refers to himself as the great white father of all the great deeds. He claims that he's the one who did them." So what did Malcolm think about education, and what can we take from that today?
Yeah, so in the film, actually, if you watch the film, I go to Columbia University archives, and Columbia is there. Oh my God, that place is on lockdown. They properly like shut down the whole place because of the Palestine protests. But actually, that was literally made for TV. I did not do any work in there. It was just pictures. I actually went to the Schomburg Center for the book, and they had a chapter called "The Negro," which isn't in the autobiography of Malcolm X, which may be one of the worst good books ever, right? Like it's really entertaining, but it gives you nothing, right? And so this chapter of the Negro is missing from the book. And in the Negro, he really goes into massive detail about what is a Negro, why is it important. And Malcolm's essentially saying, look, they in order to enslave us, they created the Negro. They made this human potty. It's this creation where we have no history, we have no language, we have no culture. We're not really human beings, right? And so that was essential for slavery, to treat us like we weren't human beings. And then once slavery ends, you still see that same trend continued, but mostly through education system, right? So what is the school system teaching us? It's teaching us, even now, it's a bit better, but the founding fathers of all disciplines.
We're in Texas. I don't know if anyway.
Go maybe not. Maybe it's going backwards in Texas. But yeah, if you think like we are basically told that white people are great and they created everything, and black people didn't create anything. And in the 60s, obviously, they were actually teaching very clear anti-Blackness to people. Africa has no history, etc., etc. And that's one of the main ways in which that's perpetuated, right? Continued. Like you're told you can't think. And I remember I was in psychology degree, I did the whitest psychology degree in the history of human beings in University of Bath years ago. And I was alienated from it. And I couldn't really work out, why am I so alienated from this curriculum? And it's because it was just all white. And when you're learning that, you are being told you cannot think. You're being told you are less than. And we're constantly reinforcing this idea of the Negro. And that is one of the key problems that we still have, is that we don't imagine we can do anything, right? We don't imagine we have the capability to do anything. Even revolution. You say black people are going to revolutionize, organize, people are like, nah, we can't do it. But that's partly because we really have internalized this idea that we are less than, that we're the Negro.
And I read all of that in the book, and I was like, I use the term Negroes all the time. It made me, so there were some parts in the book, right, where it made me sort of think introspectively about, is this the right thing I ought to be doing, or should I not be doing? I don't know, but that was definitely one of the ones in terms of the creation of the creation of the Negro. And so, oh, sorry, Amber, go ahead.
No, one thing that I was going to bring up that I started thinking about as I was reading, but also much more as I was watching the documentary, is how much of the revolution is just stifled by, I don't want to say an intellectual laziness, but I want to know, I'm very curious your thoughts on how do we encourage or energize people to engage revolutionary work with intellectuality? Because I was so proud when you were talking to those children about Malcolm X at the end of that documentary and some of the things that they were saying. And one of the things I thought about is that there are adults I know in my life that if I put them in a room and ask them the same questions that you ask those children, that they would literally just kind of stare at you blankly, having no clue or no place from which to have that conversation. And it frightens me. And I just am wondering how you think we can go about getting people to be actively engaged in the intellectual work of learning and knowing and taking in information for their own empowerment.
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Because again, to quote Malcolm, we said that one of the most important things we need is a program of political re-education, because we don't know, right? And I'd say that's certainly in the UK. I don't know. I would imagine the US is similar. One of the things that civil rights did was it opened up space, and we got into universities, and we got into, we thought the system could be treated as a bit fairer.
Y'all got too comfortable.
We got too comfortable, right? And so, whereas my parents, why I interviewed my parents in the films, because they're part of British Black Power, started a nursery, started a housing association, started a book. They actually started a bookshop because there were no black books. They said, let's go get some black books, right? Like that. Very much we understood in the 60s, 70s that they weren't for us, and so we would never have expected the schools to teach our kids stuff. We just do it ourselves, right? And what's happened in the last 40 years is that's just gone. We just kind of expect the schools to do it, and they're not doing it. And Malcolm told us, look, why would you let the enemy educate your children, right? And that's what we've done, right? And so you have a whole generation of people who don't really know that much, and you can't blame the school systems for that. Like, that's not what the schools are for. The schools are for the opposite. And so we really have to go back to saying, look, we have to. It's not just about young people, because it's young people, old people. We have to say, well, how are we going to educate people? How are we going to make sure that we're having these conversations? How are we going to? And this is partly why I made the film, right? Because everybody ain't going to pick up a 300-page book as a way of engaging, using film to engage, using community organization to engage. This has to be, if we're saying like what is liberation, community education, political education has to be at the top number one thing that we're doing, because if you can't imagine it, then you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it, right? And like you said, it is worrying just how many people don't have any grasp of the basics. And I was actually surprised at the young people, because I teach in universities, obviously, and there's the lack of politics of young people is, oh man, it's disastrous. But then I'm old enough now where that's kind of my fault, right? Like if I'm saying like, why don't the kids know? Like, well, what was I obviously done something wrong if there's a generation of kids that don't know. So I think we have to take responsibility and say, look, the school ain't going to do it, media ain't going to do it. Are there ways, even things like this podcast like this is a way to do it? Are there ways that we can reach out and educate the community ourselves? That's our responsibility.
And to that point, I was actually going to say that too, in terms of if we go back to the founding of Brokish, right? It was really meant for people like Amber, bougie Black people who have gotten so comfortable in their lives and have gotten so used to the spoils and have gotten so used to all, and just are warm and cozy. And because of that, then we don't want to challenge the system that has made us warm and cozy, right? So now we're good. There's no reason for us to try to think about what a revolution could be, because I'm good today, right? Like I don't need a revolution to be good. And that's the whole point, is seriously for us to educate people like ourselves, people who we grew up with, people who are our classmates, and be like, no, just because you're comfortable doesn't mean that there aren't hundreds of thousands and millions of people who are not comfortable. And what are we going to do about those people? And so
I'm gonna push back just a little bit. I mean, not because you called me out, but I actually think that niggas like me, niggas like you, us, okay, because you got pronoun problems, but that's fine. The comfort with us is not rooted in ignorance, right? It's rooted in complacency. Like, the shit ain't that bad for me, so do I really want to get in the trenches of revolution? Because I mean, it ain't that bad for me. You know, all I have to do is just chase a little more white proximity. I think the people that I was thinking about are the people who are getting their news and their information and their pulse of Blackness from TikToks and Instagrams, and who don't have access to other information. Because the reality of it is most Black bourgeoisie people are Black and bourgeoisie by choice. It is not by circumstance. It's not lack of information. It is a choice in solidarity to align themselves with white proximity because of the benefits that it confers onto them. And that's just some shit you gotta own. Okay.
I think you're talking about the same
everybody
people.
else. Yeah, but no, I'm
That's
talking about
person.
people. I'm talking about people whose solidarity is out of alignment in real material ways that are more impactful to them than it is to us, because they are literally paying for their ignorance in the everyday survival, right? And so it's like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. I'm listening to people on Instagram. I'm listening to these social media people. I'm defending, you know, certain Black elites in comments when I don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out. I think those are the people who I am concerned, like, how do we put a vision like Malcolm's in those people's hands who can't even intellectually wrap their mind around it?
And I think I'm less worried about people like that, because I think that your circumstances light your fire. I'm more worried about people like us who have no reason for that fire to be lit for them to care about a revolution. Those are the people that I'm more worried about, because those are the people who we elect to positions. Those are the people that we following around town. Those are the people that get to make the decisions for us. And so for them to be saying, I don't care because I feel good, that shit bothers me a lot more, because I know that the person who is too busy to be able to be intellectually involved understands that their material condition and the fact that they got to work 2 or 3 jobs to make it can be the thing that lights them up.
I mean, it sounds like that's Negro feel Negro, right? I mean, that's Malcolm's distinction. People are, and I think it is worrying when people in the field are so disconnected that there isn't. If you think, like, what does Malcolm say? He says, look, if you're in the field, if you're on the harsh end of it, you're going to be more likely to revolt. But Amber's right, though. I don't know if that's true. Like, people just
yeah, because the field Negro's aspiration is to be a house nigga, not to be free. Like, that's because that's the limit of imagination. Is your aspiration is to be less subjugated, not liberated. And to me, that's more dangerous than somebody who intellectually appreciates what liberation is, but is making a temporary or a present. It's more deliberate. The choice is more deliberate. It's not based on a lack of information, because I feel like there's a way that you can hold those people accountable if you choose to. Yeah, there's a level of accountability that people who make choices in solidarity can be held to, that people who are scraping and surviving and acting off of ignorance and misinformation and disinformation, it is very hard to create accountability and to create a pathway for true liberation for people like that, because they are so lost. Like, if your aspiration is to be a house Negro, how do you shift that?
I'm more concerned for your cousin that will call you and ask to borrow $25. I'm less concerned about that cousin than I am about Keisha Lance Bottoms. Like, I just am. I am more worried about the Black bourgeoisie and their ability to thwart any progress towards liberation than I am like working class people, or that I am people who just don't have the capacity because capitalism to engage intellectually in whatever moves they might make towards liberation.
Well, if the revolution is going to come from the field, you need to have people, and the field's not rebellion. The thing is, people, particularly people in like going for political office, or you know what they're going to do, right? We already know what they're going to do, and they expect them to do something different. They're not going to do it. They're going to do the things that are going to get them power, are going to get them up, are going to get them in the party, etc. And so, surely we need to have the people, the masses. It's about the masses, right?
It
How are we not reaching the
is.
masses at all?
It is.
I'm
I
gonna
guess-
reflect on that. That's interesting.
We gonna have to fight about this later, but I don't know.
But I have to say, though, one of the places where I go and talk, where I'm surprised they know who I am and they've engaged with the work, prisons. I'm always shocked. Prisons really is a place where people are engaging. And actually, we're going to start a Black Studies prison course in the UK because of it. Because I think that's an opportunity to and again, big up the Nation of Islam for doing this. That is a place where you can start to reach people because they got time, they got space. Even Malcolm, it's not a coincidence in prison he becomes Malcolm X. So maybe we take advantage of places like that. I think prison education is definitely one of those areas where you can start to bridge that gap, at least.
That's really encouraging to know. That's encouraging.
So there is a part that I want to have. I know we're getting a little bit short on time. I do want to have a more lengthy conversation about, and I feel like we need more time to let that conversation breathe. And so maybe we'll have to, if your schedule allows, as an important academic, I know that you often don't have.
His academic shade is a recovery.
I know she is just really on one today. Okay, Pep, this is.
I'm sorry that a man who literally works as a professor is not an academic. Like, please help me.
Does she not literally work as a professor too?
No, I didn't got my last paycheck. I'm done. But you are a working professor, sir.
Reluctant professor.
Look, we are reluctant workers.
Yeah, I guess it's a job, paid. Look. I'd say it's a job. Like you wouldn't call a bin man all the time, right? That's a garbage man, not a garbage man all the time. It's a job. When you pull in the garbage, you're a garbage man, but you're not.
That's not true. Right. And we thought about this before. We're not going to do it again. So really fast though, I want to switch gears. So Brokish started off being about money, and I'm thinking here in the U.S. about this Target boycott, right? So I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but I guess it sounds like you are, right? So Target had some DEI initiatives, and like many other companies at the top of the year, once Trump came back for a second term, they were like, we're pulling the plug on some of our DEI initiatives. And then there was a group of people. I think this particular boycott is headed by Jamal Bryant, who that should be enough to say right there. But anyway, so heading the Target boycott. And so it's like, Black people, don't go shopping down to the Target. Okay. So I want you to tell me what you think Malcolm would have had to say about this Target boycott. And I'm going to share first a quote from the book where he says, even when we try to spend our money on the block where we live or the area where we live, we're spending it with the man who, when the sun goes down, takes that basket full of money in another part of town. So we're trapped, double trapped, triple trapped. Anywhere we go, we find that we're trapped. So what do you have to say? And what do you think Malcolm would have to say about the Target boycott? And what should we do in terms of building an economic program that can be beneficial and sort of lift us up?
Yeah, I think if Malcolm was still here, he'd be like, what happened 60 years later? You still going to Target? Like, would we not build our own things? Because I think there's two ways that Malcolm answered questions. One was the short range and the long range. So I want to think, was that quote? Actually, no, that quote's after he left the nation. But, within the nation, there was very much a Black capitalist economics. Like, look, we just have to separate ourselves, look after ourselves. They're going to get wiped out anyway, right? And so Malcolm does embracing that in some ways. And even in that speech, he just left the nation. And he's talking about economic Black nationalism. And he was for that because he says, look, on a short-term scale, like we are in America, we live here, we need to have control of the resources, control of the economy as much as we can, right? So there's a lesson here that the boycott's a good thing, but shouldn't it be the case that we can support Black businesses and black stuff? Shouldn't we be able to provide ourselves for ourselves as much as possible, right? And that is important in the short term, but in a big scale, long term, the problem is capitalism, right? So that's actually not boycott Target, burn down Target. What do we do? So Malcolm has both a short range program and a long range program. In the short term, it's do as much as we can to look after ourselves. Forget Target generally, not just boycott it, but boycott it and build. And Malcolm definitely said that. It's not just boycott it, They don't be going to the Target demanding things. Never that. Like, this is take our money from Target and put it in our community. That's what we should be doing. But still, if you look at, we're still always asking for things. Our politics is always begging for things. Like, please do this, please do that, please do this. Let's listen to demands rather than, we have this money. Let's what can we do with it ourselves within our own communities and try to be as independent as possible. I think is the aim.
And that's the part that's hard for me when we talk about we have this money. I mean, we know we don't have that much of this money, right? But and when we talk about taking our money from Target, even if we take our money to somebody in our community, they also bought their stuff from China, right? Like, right? Like, we talking about my head wrap. That yes, I bought it in Africa, but it says made in China on it. When I asked them, I was like, hey, do y'all have any local things? They were like, no, we get all our head wraps from China. So I'm like, capitalism is a global system, just like anti-Blackness is a global system, right? And so I love when Black people get together and do stuff, right? I love when I'm at a party and everybody's doing the line dance, right? I know Amber doesn't believe this. I love a good corporate fast. I love when people are praying together and believing for something. I love corporate acts because I do think there is power in people getting together. But I'm also, and I lack the imagination. I'll say that. I lack the radical imagination. But I'm like, we boycott Target, but then what? Like, we're still supporting, whether it's the Chinese empire. So I'm really struggling in this age in particular, because everybody's like, oh my God, y'all, you can see the Target boycott is working because Target had a bad earnings call. And I'm like, I actually think Target probably had a bad earnings call because of tariffs and other stuff. And they just saying that it was anyway. So I don't know what to do. I don't know if either one of y'all have any thoughts about, like, what really do we do?
Yeah, like I say, short term and long term. So I think one of the things you went back to before about bringing people along, and look, boycott Target, people understand it. It's understandable. So whatever, it's not a bad thing. But can we radicalize it? So we boycott, but then what? On the short term, I do think, look, it's very clear Black people don't have as much capital. This is obviously an issue. But there are things you can do to kind of keep some more of that money in the economy, which would be good, right? Then you could use it for different things, etc., etc.
But there is no Black economy. So even when you say to keep it in the economy, what economy are you talking about?
Even like local economy, right? Like, so if you spend money locally and it stays locally, that's marginally better. It's not like, it's not a solution, right? The short range is never a solution. It's like, it's marginally better. That's not a bad thing, right? But in the long term, and I think there is a quote in the book from Malcolm where he talks about he's traveling through the continent of Africa, and he's saying, well, economic nationalism is great, but hang on a second, what about the warehouses? What about the supply? What about all this stuff? It doesn't really work. And if you think globally, it don't work at all, because all of these goods is from the oppression of us somewhere else, right? So then we have to be doing long term. Long term is, this is why he travels to Africa. This is why we're organizing the Convention for African People, to say long term, can you have the unity across the African continent, a revolutionary pan-Africanism that actually can create a different political and economic system? You need a new economic system that isn't going to happen through boycotting Target or buying Black.
Right. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna be a little vulnerable here. So a long time ago, when I went to prep school and when I was still firmly planted in the Kumbaya, we shall overcome, Blacks and whites together, holding
When'd you get out of that?
in the sand camp. Remind me to cuss you out when we get done. One of the main reasons why I was there for so long is because the question that I always felt like Black radicalism couldn't answer is, okay, we all get together in our huddle, in our place, in our swath of land, our country, Wakanda, wherever we are. But nobody answers the question that unless white people or non-Black people are completely annihilated, there has to be a level of coexistence. So we're always still entrenched to some degree. So what is that thing? Like, what does liberation actually look like if even when we do all of this stuff, we get together, we pull our resources, we still gotta be entrenched? What then? And
not just coexistence. We have to believe that they're not going to be violent.
Oh, they'll be violent, definitely.
Right. Well, yes, and but assuming we win, assuming we, you know, all of that. But if any of them survive, if there is anything other than us in this prophetically imagined world, what next? Like, unless we are completely self-sustaining and we don't have to go outside for anything, which I don't think is realistic, we are still entrenched in the very thing we have fought for or fought to be free from to some degree. And that to me has always been the weak link of Black radicalism. Because even if we all get together and live in our own neighborhood, I mean, you know, that's not liberation. Or if it is liberation, then we can do like the Muslims in Texas and build us a little master plan community and call it a day.
Well, yeah, but this is why revolution in one country doesn't make sense. Like, this is why economic independence, the economic nation of the nation in America makes no sense. Like, you're still in capitalism.
But I think Amber is talking about if people from all over the diaspora end up in one place, right? Like,
yeah. So I'm getting there, right? So that's the long range program of any Black radical politics is Africa, because actually Africa is the place for the time being, because the resources are kind of dwindling because they're being stolen. But Africa as a continent is the one place where you actually can build an economy that doesn't need anything else. It literally has everything you need. So that if you actually had Pan-African unity, you could, in theory, create a whole different economy. That doesn't mean you don't deal with them. It doesn't mean you don't trade. But actually, internally, you don't need anything else. And once you don't need anything else, then you can't be controlled, right? And that's why Pan-Africanism has always been the ultimate long range, what's the end point? And I'm not sure what we can't imagine. We should at least be able to imagine it, right? Like, but it seems like so much damage has been done to us through this neocolonialism that we can't even imagine it. Like, we're just like, that's not possible.
I can't imagine a world where white people are not violent and trying to take everything you have all the time. That's the sticky point for me, right? So even if I can imagine that we're there and it's working and we have access to the resources and we've built the things, I can't imagine where you actually have peace because it's always being threatened by those forces.
Oh yeah, which is why defense is key. So when Malcolm did the OAAU, defense was a big part of it. Like, you have to have defense, and we know this is the most violent system that's ever existed. Western capitalism. They'll kill all of us before they let that happen. Like, they could kill every single one of us. That's what they would do. So the question is, how do we defend? How do we strategize? And actually, this is why Malcolm came back to America, because when he's in Ghana, he knows he's going to get killed. He knows the nation has gone in for him. The CIA has gone in for him. He's like, if I go back to America, I'm going to die. And there's someone, I think it's Nkrumah, says, look, just stay. You can bring your family over here. You'll be safe. And he's like, nah, it's important organizing in America. But also, one of the big benefits we have, actually, ironically, is this big diaspora in the West, because we can agitate in the West as well. So it's easier. If we were just all in Africa revolting, they just kill us all and we'll all be gone. But when you have 40 million in America, 20 million, etc., when you've got millions of us actually in the West, then we can hopefully agitate and try to prevent that genocide if it comes, right? So there's a benefit of us being here, at least in some term, to destabilize the reaction to the African Revolution, in theory. But yeah, it's a problem. Don't get me wrong. There's no way Malcolm didn't have the answer to that problem. But I always say these are the questions we should ask. Like, that's the question we should ask. How do we build something that's defensible? Because we will get large scale violence undoubtedly. But that don't mean it's not possible. I just say that.
Yeah. And so because we are short on time, I am going to ask you if you're going to come back and talk about one of our favorite topics. In terms of, you spent what do they call it? The penultimate chapter of the book talking about a lot of people. Like, you were just dragging people around. People are minding their own business, right? People walking down the street and being attacked by you in this book. Yeah. And so I want to come back again to this idea of, how do we build solidarity when we dragging people all around town? And I also want to talk about how, and I don't think this is just you, but I have seen like a lack of actual engagement with what some of these groups are saying from people who talk about them, because the groups can seem so unserious that people are like, we don't have to engage with this seriously because they can't be for real, but they are for real. And they do have serious, in some cases, political programs that I think we need to engage with critically and seriously. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, I just a quick one to say that anybody I mentioned in the book, I hope I engage you seriously. And I only did it because those are the ideas which are powerful, right? So I wasn't dragging anybody randomly. It was these are the powerfully dangerous ideas that need to be dealt with.
We'll talk about it.
Anyway.
We'll talk about it. Well, I don't think anybody will think this is a real cliffhanger, but we'll pretend like it's a cliffhanger, a season cliffhanger.
He was dragged in the book.
We'll invite you back to have that conversation when we talk about the broken political system. So we'll invite you back to talk about those people, because I was like, damn, he just took these people for a ride.
That's Malcolm though. That's if Malcolm was alive, he'd be way worse than me.
I love how you just hide behind Malcolm, like, oh, it wasn't me, it was Malcolm. I'm just okay. So, Amber, were you gonna look like you were about to say something?
No, I wasn't gonna say nothing, child. I didn't think it was that bad, and I didn't think you were wrong, because how bitch got a job telling people to take a nap? Bitch, your job is telling people to take a nap. Your capitalist job is to
We're gonna talk about it later. We're gonna talk about it later.
I didn't think it was that bad, so
we're gonna talk about it later.
Yes, we can talk about it later. I just didn't think it was that bad. I didn't think it was that bad.
Y'all are terrible, and I am not going to stand for it. So, Kehinde, tell us what you want. Ultimately, tell us what you want people to take away from the book, from the documentary. Tell us when they will be able to get the book, where they can find the documentary. Act like you on a damn book tour.
Oh yeah, sorry. So I would stress the point of the book is one, really to understand what Malcolm's politics is 100 years after he was born. But also it is a practical thing. So we have Harambee Organization of Black Unity, that's blackunity.org.uk, which we built on the basis of the OAAU and said, look, this is the political program, let's do it, let's try and work together. As part of that, we're doing a convention for African people, which will be Gambia, April the 18th to 19th next year. And so we have Make It Plain. We put we made the documentary, I did a bit of a tour, and then put it straight on YouTube so people could watch it. And it's like a non-commercial, let's make money off it. Let's just have it as a resource. So if you go to Make It Plain's YouTube channel, you'll find the documentaries there. We're just going to be playing it. Have a watch. Because the whole aim of it is to say, look, Malcolm has an analysis and a political program, which is just as important now as it was 60 years ago. And we want to do it. So I really would encourage people, Harambee Organization of Black Unity, Make It Plain is the website, podcast, etc.
Show us the book.
Oh yeah, don't mind me. I forgot.
Tell
that was some other media thing. I forgot it.
When they gonna be able to get the book for our US folks?
Yeah, so actually, it's actually got a different title in the US. It is The Political Life. Nobody can be reading The Political Life of Malcolm X, and has a picture of Malcolm on the front, because in Britain they didn't put a picture of Malcolm on the front. Anyway, it don't come out in America till September the 9th. I think I'm coming to the States as well, so hopefully I'm coming to do some events September the 9th. But the film you can watch now, but the book you'd have to wait for a bit to see who gets dragged. In chapter 11, You Left Your Mind in Africa.
Yes.
My favorite chapter.
And you need to pay me and Amber to come help moderate some of your book talks. We're available.
Okay, that'd be great. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to come to Texas for definite though.
Yes, but did you hear the part where I said pay?
Yeah, publishers. I check the white people got to pay the checks, right? That's reparations.
We take money. We like Malcolm. We will take money from the white man. Malcolm. I read it in the book. It said that Malcolm was okay with that, and so am I.
Yes, we'll try and find some reparations for you. Thank you.
Perfect. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. I guess it was a pleasure. And
the shade. I come here to say shade all the time.
We will look forward to catching up with you later. So Amber, tell us, what's the homework for the brokers?
So guys, the first thing I want you to do is catch up, okay? You know, after the second week of class, you got to be on your P's and Q's, okay? You got to start doing the homework. So catch up, get caught up, tell 3 friends to get caught up, and then we're going to post in the receipts the link to the Malcolm X documentary. And I would encourage you all to watch it. It's roughly an hour and 20 minutes, but so informative, so much information. And it is a great alternative to people who either don't have the time or the, desire to read an entire book. So watch the documentary, okay? That's the homework. That's it. I'm on y'all side. So at least do what I ask you to do.
Oh my gosh. Hey, so y'all,
I'm sorry, Pebbles. I know that wasn't as much as you wanted.
are you done yet? So I can do my closing. I'm trying to do my closing.
Yes.
Okay.
Come on, child. Come on.
But y'all, it's good. We're happy that instead of using a Black man to debunk foolishness that he was spouting, it's nice, it's refreshing to be able to have a Black man and to be able to leverage his insights to talk about how we get free. And so I know that far too many of us feel really cozy and comfortable in our positions on this American plantation, and that we're hesitant to make sacrifices for the future that we may never see. But I think that liberation requires us all to give up some things to make this society be one where we can thrive and be fully human. And so let's take some time to think about how we can help pave the way to that reality that may be hard for us to imagine right now. So thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to catching up with you on the next episode of Brokish.
All right, good people. Thanks for listening to Brokish. For more episodes, visit us at brokish.com or subscribe, and Brokish will get direct deposited into your favorite podcast app on the 1st and 15th. Share Brokish with your friends and join the conversation on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Music for Brokish is Come Get Some by Blank and Kit. Until next time, goodbye and good luck.